Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Commercial Property Roadshow. You're here with Helen Tarrant, and I'm here with Mike Mortlock, and we're going to talk about depreciation. I know for some of you, you might have seen a previous video of me talking generally about how depreciation actually works as a strategy for commercial property. As in, like, you should be getting a depreciation report, and that you should be putting it in as part of your looking at whether it works for your ROI, or whether you're taking, because a property has more depreciation benefits, whether you should take a lesser yield, or because of that. And now that's very strategy, big picture, and very unique to individual circumstances. What we're going to do today is going through the detail with Mike, because he loves detail. And because depreciation is all about detail and what you can claim and what you can't claim. So today we've got a couple of scenarios we're going to work through, so it becomes really applicable to you. And of course, different reports of different things. But the main thing is I want to take you through the journey. And that's what Mike's going to do, take you through the journey of the difference between resi and commercial in terms of depreciation, take you through the journey of what it is that they look for in a commercial property depreciation, and also just generally some tips or in your journey where what time you should be getting your depreciation report, and how you should be best utilizing it. So very practical, hands-on. So without much ado, hi Mike.
Hi, how you doing, Helen? Thanks for having me on. It's a pleasure.
Always great to have you on. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, look, I always kind of joke saying I wanted to be a fighter pilot when I grew up, but I became a quantity surveyor. So, it's obviously it's not exactly that close. You aim for the moon and you hit, I don't know, Liverpool. But I actually do love quantity surveying. So really, my specialty is construction cost estimating. But of course, there is a whole sort of subset of quantity surveying that's dedicated to the tax depreciation side of things. So it's kind of a hybrid between a construction estimator and an accountant in some respects, but we only look at a very small part of the legislation. And I started MCG with a business partner in 2011, and we've been having a lot of fun maximising deductions for people ever since.
So quantity surveying, for those of us out there who actually don't know what that is, tell me, what exactly is quantity surveying?
Yeah, so if you think about sort of the original genus of quantity surveying, it was the bills of quantity. So it was how many individual widgets do we need, and what is the price? And so if you think about any time that someone might benefit from knowing how much something costs, that's where a quantity surveyor would be involved. So if you're thinking about feasibility to do a development, or you're a bank lending people money, you want to make sure that their budget is okay, that the money that you're providing comes in milestones based on the works completed to site. So anyone that's building or developing or doing anything with construction, a quantity surveyor can help. And on the tax side of things, it's really just helping the cash flow and maximise the deductions. So the deductions that you get for investing in property are the same as, say, personal deductions. If you're a student, you claim your textbook. So it just comes off the taxable income. And really, in most cases, it's money for jam, right? It's money for nothing. So all investors should be looking into whether they have deductions in their property.
Yeah, absolutely. Which is why we're having this conversation here, so that everyone out there knows that that it should be part of your journey. That we have a journey for our clients to follow as part of developing and building their wealth through commercial property, and it's all about that return on investment. So, Mike, tell us the difference of commercial versus residential. So a lot of our clients come from the residential side, and they're investing for the first time into commercial. So
there are some things that are exactly the same. Some things are very, very different. If you think about residential versus commercial, some things that are the same is there's two components of depreciation. There is the building structure and all the structural components. So in a house, that might be the timber frame and the concrete slab and the roof. Let's say we're looking at a retail premises, it's still going to have maybe brick walls and an iron or a tile roof. So all of those structural components, there's different cutoff dates for whether they qualify that differ between resi and commercial. But that component, that structural component, that's common to commercial and residential. Then you've got the plant and equipment items, which are really kind of like the loose fitting assets. So in a residential property, that would be things like ovens and cooktops and air conditioners and carpets and those sorts of things. In a commercial property, some of those things will be exactly the same, like carpets and like air conditioners, but they have different effective lives. So that's to say, the tax office says that, say, carpet in a pub might have a 5-year effective life because of the use of that asset being much more than much more demanding use than that would be of a house that has like an 8-year effective life. The big difference with commercial and residential I see is the cut-off dates are different. So depending on the commercial property depends whether what the cut-off date is for that original structure. For most commercial, it's 1982, whereas for residential, it's 1987. So you can have a property that's built a little bit further ago and still claim those original deductions. And one of the big standouts is the plant and equipment assets. Not only is there around about 50 times more commercial plant and equipment assets. I mean, you think about commercial entities, they can be farms. So there's all sorts of things like chemical spraying assets, there's trellises for wineries, there's bottling line stuff. You just don't get that in a residential property. And probably the biggest advantage on the plant and equipment side of things is that on the 9th of May 2017, the government said you can't claim plant and equipment items for established residential properties anymore. So you either have to buy brand new or put the asset in yourself. That is not the case with commercial property. So that is a huge advantage from a deductions point of view.
Oh, excellent. So there is some fundamental differences. And I think the best way for me, I've always found with our clients is to and our viewers is to show them an example. So I've given Mike, just before this, in preparation for this talk, two case studies, and these are case studies that we've talked about. So for some of you who have attended our boot camp, you've seen this case studies, or for some of you who attended our webinars in the evenings, you've seen this case study as well. Now, the reason we chose this two is because they're different. Firstly, they're located in different states. And I guess that's one of the questions we were asked, is like, is there a big difference between if buying in different states? And then one is a strata property and one is a freestanding. So that's often the question is raised by our viewers. If I'm buying a strata, should I even get a depreciation report? So, Mike, just what's the difference if someone's buying a strata versus a freestanding? Should they, if they were buying a strata, be even bothered to get a depreciation report?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I want to answer that very quickly and succinctly because it's important. The answer is yes. So there's no reason why you shouldn't get a depreciation schedule just because it's a strata titled property. Now, you might sort of be easily confused by the fact that, say, if it's freestanding, the insurance you might need to get, whereas if it's strata, the strata title insurance would be sort of pulled together. Depreciation is very, very different. So the real difference between a freestanding and a strata title property is your ownership of the common areas. So in commercial, we're going to have a look at a retail example, but I always like to explain it the easiest way is, let's say you've got a strata titled warehouse. So what you're actually getting when you purchase that property is you own the warehouse, but there will normally be a driveway to actually get to that warehouse because there could be 30 of them in that development. There might be automatic gates, there might be lighting, there might be fire booster pumps. So if there's 30 properties in that strata community, then you might have 1/30th ownership of all of those assets. And it really doesn't matter what sort of assets there are. So in a residential property, you could own a unit in a complex of 200, and there might be 6 lifts worth $1 million each. So you might own 1/200th. It doesn't work exactly like that. It's not like the number of properties and then it's divided equally, because, say, a penthouse would normally have a higher entitlement because it's got more use of the lift. It's got a greater proportionment of space. But it's an easy sort of rough idea, is to say you own, say, 1/30th.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense, because that's one of the things a lot of our clients says, well, I'm just buying an office space, or I'm just buying a retail space, so there's really no point for me to get a depreciation report, whereas almost all of our clients are buying freestanding, going, oh yeah, stand of the thing, let's get a depreciation report. So it's good to clarify that. So, and this is why we said this example. So if I can jump on, I'm just going to start out with the sort of sharing an example with you. So this is the first one that we have, which is a little vet clinic. So I'll just share that with you so that you get to see that, so everyone else gets to see it. So this is the vet clinic here, and we are just going to go through that. Oh, I'll make it full screen. There you go. Ah, there you go. So this is the animal clinic, so this is in just outside of Newcastle, very close to where you are.
Yeah, it's not a million miles away. It's probably only 20-minute drive. I've actually been in this building before, which is just a happy accident.
We like happy accidents. So bought this property. It was a bit over 1.1 million. It's 2 residential houses joined together into a commercial premise, renovated internally. It's turned into a vet hospital and a veterinary generally. So there's just some photos so everyone can see what it is. And it's got a little parking area at the back, and then a little kind of shed at the back, and they're turning into grooming for it. So full usage, right? Yeah, and a little rabbit as a representation.
Isn't that lovely?
Yeah. My son's been asking for about a rabbit. We might be going down the pet road.
All right.
It's a rabbit now, but a dog in 3 years.
Right. Okay. It's good. It's always good to have a contingency plan.
Yeah, this is a trial pet.
Right. Okay.
So here we can see that the aerial view of the actual property and how it was built, and that just sort of gives you a bit of a floor plan for everyone else there, just sort of having a look at it. It's and right in the middle, you can see it's joined the two properties joined together, and then we've got the studio at the back and the building as well. So that's just a layout of it so that's the EOI form. So with this property, so tell us what will you be looking for. Take us through the journey that if I was a client and I said, look, I've just bought this property, right? Tell us what I can do with it in the depreciation space.
Yeah, I mean, there's certain things that my brain has just been tuned into because you've done this so many times, looked at thousands of property. It actually ruins dinner with my wife because I'm looking at fire detection systems when we're out to dinner. But where I suffer and my wife more importantly suffers, you'll be able to gain from. So what I tend to do is look firstly to get indications of the age of the property. So we always kind of start with depreciation deductions for the original structure. Is it going to qualify? So in this instance, we're looking to see if the original dwelling or dwellings would be built after 1982. Now, we've got some pretty clear indications, even just on page 1. You can see that sort of Victorian wrought iron sort of stuff. You can see the iron roof and just the way that it's built and constructed. You can see a little bit of, wear and tear with the timber cladding and that sort of thing. So that gives us a bit of an indication that it's not going to be able to qualify for original structural components. But the big difference, and when you were looking at that aerial map as well, I sort of look to see, are the roofs, the material, is it the same? Is it the same colour? Does it look like there's been improvements over the years? Now, we know that this has been renovated, and when we're looking inside, we can see that those aren't going to be original tiles. You can see that that's been painted, there's new lighting and there's flooring. And one of the big differences with commercial that I forgot to mention before is the different entities. So, for example, you're representing the purchaser of the building, but the vets are their own commercial entity as well. So they will own their own equipment. So the medical equipment and things like that, that's what we would want to clarify. Does the person own the animal cages, for example? In this case, I would assume not. But yeah, really step one is to just have a look to see what's been improved to the property. Obviously, it was 2 and it's been turned into 1. And you can actually see that that's a pretty good picture where you can actually see the concrete sort of hard stand area. It's a newer concrete than the place next door. You can kind of see, the age of the concrete. So what we've been able to see on this property is that it's been re-roofed. We can see that there's been some guttering replaced. It's been painted internal and externally. The rear car parking hard stand has been updated, as I mentioned. There's new fencing. The retaining walls have been updated. There's a small little studio out the back, which I think you're talking about is going to be the boarding area. That's been added within the last 5 years, roughly, according to our research. And it's had an internal renovation to the practice. So, floor tiling, reception cabinetry, other fixed cabinets, bathroom update, tiling, electrical, plumbing, all those sorts of things. So one of the real, furphies when it comes to depreciation is if the original structure doesn't qualify for deductions, then it's not worthwhile getting a report done. But in this instance, all of those improvements, all of those renovations will attract deductions, and fairly significant ones. So we're looking at prior capital works, around 200 or 250K worth of work. And an easy way to calculate what that would mean from a depreciation point of view is either times it by 2.5%, or you can divide it by 40. So if you divide it by 40, you will get the yearly deductions on the structural improvements. And that happens every financial year from the date the works are done through 40 years. So if it was done 10 years ago, you'd still have 30 years worth of claims on that. So the structure is the first. The first thing we look at is how old is it? Will the original qualify? And if not, what has been the history of the property? What improvements have been done? And I was able to sort of rattle off a few different things there. Then we look to the plant and equipment items, what the actual owner will inherit with that purchase. So we've got things like the solar panels. You could see those on the roof. There's about 40 solar panels. So there's a solar power generating system, which is it's a tax office category for commercial and residential property. You've got the security systems, the fire extinguishers, the smoke alarms, ducted air conditioning, the whole lighting system. There's some vinyl floors, which typically you see in veterinary practices, bathroom assets like toilets, exhaust fans, hot water, and things like the switchboards as well. So when it comes to plant and equipment, we'd probably estimate around $50,000 or $60,000 worth of plant and equipment. So in this particular property, we'd be looking around $14,000 to $18,000 worth of tax deductions in the first full financial year. So for people that aren't terribly familiar with depreciation, that number doesn't go back in your pocket, but it comes off your taxable income. So if you're owning that in a structure that has a 30% marginal tax rate, you'll be getting 30% of that 14 to 18 grand in that first financial year.
Yeah. So the way that we sort of work that out is if someone, the client, the tenant at the moment is paying $70,000 net rent at the moment. The mortgage on this property, it's an interest only, and my interest only is always across the board to, the purchase price. It's roughly, about $30,000 or so. So you got about a positive cash flow, about $40,000. The depreciation actually comes off that. So, let's say, 15K comes off that. So you're paying tax on the 25,000 of that. So really you're sort of saving anywhere between, anywhere from someone who will be saving $3,000 to anywhere to $5,000 to $8,000 in tax, depending on which entity you hold it in and what tax bracket you end up being in. So it can be actually quite lucrative, and you actually, definitely make back your report fee in 1 year. So yeah.
And then from a depreciation point of view, I think it's important to notice that you haven't cherry picked this one because the deductions are crazy or because it's atypical. I mean, this is a typical type of property that I assume is your sort of commercial property investment stock, and some do better than others. The second property that we're going to look at is definitely the pick from a depreciation point of view, and we'll cover off the examples. But it just goes to show that a property, I'm not even sure when that would have been constructed. It could have been in the 40s or 50s, but you can still see that it's still worthwhile getting a report done, even though it's built that long ago.
Yeah, absolutely. And time frame wise, and I guess roughly price point for if someone wants to get a depreciation report, just taking this as an example, what and when should they be sort of asking you to get that done?
Yeah, we always encourage people to be getting in touch with us straight away, because the main reason is that we don't want people to forget, because we've crunched data in the residential space that we found that the average person that misses out on deductions because they've waited too long and they can't back claim it is missing out on $20,537. And when we look at that and we extrapolate it across the investor population, we're talking like 130,000 investors that have actually waited so long to get a depreciation schedule that they will miss out on some past claims. So it's important to get it done very quickly, just so you don't forget. But also because things may be thrown away in I guess the course of owning that property. So if you get a report straight away, you get a snapshot of what was there. And it's better to look at what was there at the beginning, because if you're adding things over time, someone like myself doesn't have to physically go and inspect that. If you put a new, say, air conditioning system in, you'll know the date that it was installed and you'll know the cost, and that information can be just directly given to your accountant.
Yeah, fabulous. Yeah. So, I mean, so really, most of the time where we like our clients to start the process, we have a period of conditional and unconditional. During that time, we get some pest and building reports, and they probably go to you. So what are some of the things they need if someone wants to get a report? What do they need to provide you?
Yeah, and the best time to really organise that is in and around settlement. So we don't want to be inspecting things that are just still going through due diligence. But once you know that it's exchanged and it's settled, or it's coming up to settlement and we've got access, that's the right time. But there's not a tremendous amount we really need straight away. We need the address and we need to know who we need to speak to organise access for our inspection. And then it's just things like the legal purchasing entity name. So if it's in your family trust or a proprietary limited company, we need to know that. We need to know the settlement date, because that's really effectively the start date for the report. We need to know the purchase price, any improvements that you know about that the previous owner has done. Of course, we do our own research, but sometimes there'll be anecdotal advice from the agent to say that it's been completely rewired, or there's been some work done that might even be invisible. If you're planning on doing any immediate work to the property, we'll capture that into the report. And that's really about it. It's, there is a little bit of homework, but it's not too arduous. And at the end of the rainbow is hopefully a pot of tax deductions.
Yeah, absolutely. And coming to think about that, it's really interesting, because I'm about to buy a vacant property and we're about to do fit outs and work on it. So we'll probably come to you and say, look, can we have a before then and after? So I mean, that's an interesting point. So some of our clients will do refurbishments, and that's one of the keys they look for. They're not looking for a set and forget like this one. They're looking for something that is basically run down that they're going to fully refurbish out. So how does that work in terms of depreciation? Should they come to you after it's all done or before it's all done?
It's always good to just come and ask the question. It depends on what's being thrown away and what's been done and what sort of the purpose was prior. So the tax office in the residential space, they say you need to purchase the property with the intention to rent it out as is, to be able to claim, say, scrapping deductions based on things that are thrown away. So if you're purchasing a completely vacant property, it's hard to sort of argue that, the assets have kind of run their course, or you need to upgrade things because it's not being rented out at the maximum amount. So it just kind of depends. I mean, often we can get some photos of the original and that's sufficient. If what is there when you purchase is fundamentally a lot less than what the end product would be, then it's probably more important that we look at that, because where I sort of made that example of the air conditioning system being added, if you're doing a huge fit out, you might know that you're spending $1 million on it, or a refurb of $1 million, but you're not necessarily going to have that broken down into the vinyl tiles and the air conditioning and, you know, the switchboards and the cabling and all that sort of stuff. And even if you do, there's an apportionment of labour that we can put over those assets as well, because someone has to design the work, someone has to install the work. So we're talking about total installed costs. So that can be a different to, say, a builder breaking it up, saying you're getting $8,000 worth of vinyl, for example.
Yeah, understand. So so case by case, but if you're looking at refurbishments, please, you know, reach out to Michael. Actually, the link to his website's below, so it'll be part of this. And also, if you wanted to reach out, you can always reach out to us at helentarrant.com, and we can give you an introduction as well. So that those are a few ways to connect with Mike after this as well. But to go on to our next one, I wanted to share with you, obviously, we had the one that an office space, and we come back to the question of should we be looking at, you know, depreciation when we're looking at an office space that is a strata. So, and obviously that question got answered, but this is the property in Walker Street in Dandenong. So this is in Victoria. So the other one we had was in New South Wales. Is there a difference between different states if they're claiming depreciation, or is it more across the board?
No, the only real difference is in construction costs. So there are certain parts of the country where it costs more than other places to build. So we need to factor that in. So that's not something that the client would necessarily need to worry about. When it comes to, say, depreciation, what might be called a strata plan in New South Wales might be called a plan of subdivision in Victoria, for example, but not fundamentally there's no real big difference per state from a depreciation point of view.
Okay, that's actually quite good. So let's just have a look at this property. So this property is rented out as it's an interesting strata space. It's got a little bit of retail at the front, and then it's got the whole floor of office space above. It's in Dandenong, so it's just sort of outside of Melbourne, sort of metro, but it's still part of a suburb of Melbourne, and it's got Anglicare as the tenant, so you know, your brand name type tenant in there. So I'm just going to increase that. So just some photos of the property. So good refurbishments, you know, carpet tiles probably. I don't know. Depends on what you think. Carpet tiles. I look at that, I go carpet tiles.
Yeah, it looks like you can see a little bit of the joins there.
Yeah, you probably look at the picture. I walk through and I go, yeah, okay. How much do you think the tenant's paying you rent? What do you think the yield is on this property?
Yeah, we never worry about that. Often property managers will say, oh, by the way, it's renting for XYZ. We throw that information in the bin. It makes no difference to us. But of course, you and I have got very different jobs to do.
Yeah, it'll be interesting how dinner conversation like, right? I'll be like, yeah, so I think the refurbishments, I'm like, well, you know, so, you know, well, maybe we could cut this up into two and increase the rent over there. You know, what do you think if I put a wall in the middle? So
your husband's long suffering as well, by the sound of it.
Yeah, my husband and my business partner, he loves resi, and he goes through and I go, well, whatever. And but we're driving past some warehouse and I go, stop, I gotta go and get out and see this fit out. It's just like, oh my God, no.
So when I'm looking at these photos, I mean, looking at the roof, you can see the air conditioning plant. When we're going through in the car park, it looked like there was a gate, and I was instinctively looking for an automatic gate motor, which is plant and equipment. There's something red in the back there, which could be a fire hose reel. Obviously, you can see the lighting, and when we're looking inside, you know, there's the carpets and the lighting and the fire services. You can see a little security camera in that picture. There's that signage box, which is plant and equipment. So as long as it's identifying a business, we can see the ducted AC in there. So these are all the things that my brain sort of zeroes in on this one. That looks like it's a bit of either floating timber or vinyl floor there. We've got the dishwasher, the zip boil units. These are all plant and equipment items that we can claim. Also looking at some of the partitioning, you can actually claim deductions on demountable partitioning. So some of that would be demountable, some of it fixed. I can see the blinds there. So you can probably see it's a different sort of way to look at a property than an investor would. because you're just looking at the assets and the construction part of it there. So when we did the due diligence on this, or at least the analysis on this, of course, we had a look at the plant and equipment items, and we had a look at the common areas. The good news for this particular one is that we found that it was constructed in early 1988. So that means it's going to have depreciation deductions on the original building structure. So that's going to make a huge difference, because we're talking about 622 square metres of internal office. So we need to estimate the cost to build that as at the time that it was built in 1988. So not only do we have to be experts in construction costs today, we also have to index them back to historical points of time and then into points of the country as well. So, for example, in Melbourne, there might be a building index of 100, but in Dandenong, it's 103. So that would mean it's 3% more expensive to build there, just by virtue of transport of materials and potential labour shortages and those sorts of things. So in from the Division 43, or the structural point of view, you can kind of see that it's had some updates. It's had some internal painting. The kitchen obviously doesn't scream 1988 to you. It's like 2000 plus. There's glass partitions. There's a fixed reception desk, which is a plant and equipment item. You know, the ceiling tiles have been updated, the bathrooms as well. And in the common areas, we found that the car park's been resurfaced. There's new entry doors, new tiling, new painting, security gates, and fencing. So not only have we got the original structure as qualifying, but there's also been some improvements to the property, which will add to the deductions as well. When it comes to the common property, there's also plant and equipment items in the common that this investor will own a share of. I'm not sure of the exact entitlement for this one, but whatever it is, it might be 1/50, or sometimes they do weird things like 10,000 over 4,462,000. I just think these land surveyors sometimes, or these cadastral surveyors, get a little bit bored. So the common assets, there's fire services like emergency warning, intercommunication, extinguishers, hose reels, those sorts of things. There's an automated entry door. So, you know, there's the sensor doors that open up their plant and equipment, and they're very expensive. You know, they can be $3,500 to $5,000 for one of those. Lighting, ventilation, hot water, CCTV, the business signage, which we talked about as well. And inside the actual property, you know, the carpets, the blinds, the vinyl, the lighting, again, all of the fire services, the hot water systems, the dishwasher, all the ducted AC. So these all are going to make a difference from a deduction point of view. So when it comes to the full-on numbers, I mean, our estimate for the original capital works, so the construction of the property, would be around the sort of 350 to 400K mark. So remember, if you're dividing that by 40, then, you know, that's going to be, what, $10,000 a year. The prior additional works, we're seeing that there's 150 to 200K of spend. It might not necessarily look like that much, but when you go through and you think this was a 1988 property, not much of it looks like 1988, certainly internally anymore. The plant and equipment items, because it's an office, there's quite a lot of plant and equipment items. I mean, even those carpet tiles, it's a fair amount of floor space, so it can be quite expensive. So we're seeing around about 100K worth of plant and equipment items. So for this particular property, as distinct from the last one where we're sort of saying 14 to 18K, we'd be probably looking around the sort of 30 to 35 as a conservative estimate in the first full year for this property. So it definitely punches a little bit harder from a depreciation point of view.
Wow, that's quite amazing, because you know, like this property was bought for 1.7 mil, which is, you know, for most people that's probably doesn't really matter. But the thing is that, you know, at the time, because it had to be an unconditional contract, we bought it during a period where, you know, they were COVID sensitive, so, you know, they got a 7% yield in Melbourne, which is sort of unheard of. But on something like that, where you're at 1.7, they're, you know, taking across the board, say, a 3% the client's getting somewhere around $68,000-$70,000 in terms of positive cash flow. That writes off 50% of that cash flow in terms of the depreciation. So your tax on it just could be $10,000-$15,000 you're saving on it.
Yes.
So it can be quite significant. So for most people, that's that definitely is worth the report. So I'll be definitely sending this video to that client. It says, watch this video.
There you go. We've gone all the way through it and broken it all down for them. So you don't normally get that sort of VIP treatment. But certainly when people get in touch with me and they say, I've purchased X property, or they flick through an address, I mean, this is the behind the scenes of what we actually do just to assess those deductions. And I'm happy to have that conversation with anyone. But normally people will just get, in the first full year, we see X to Y as a range of deductions. But these are all the little components that we look at to get that estimate. And these are only estimates. Of course, to complete the full depreciation schedule, we need to go to site and we need to measure everything. We need to catalogue all of those assets, and we'll get it down to the nitty gritty. We don't issue a report with a range. It'll actually have to the dollar figure, but we're pretty confident it's going to fall in that sort of range. Yeah, well, that's really why we engage you, but also, it's quite amazing that you do have someone that will actually go out and do the measurements and work that through, because it's definitely detailed work and you've got to have a love for it. Yes, yeah, I think so. And as weird as it seems, I do definitely enjoy it. It is a long way from being a fighter pilot, but I mean, close enough, right? Yeah, it's close enough. Yeah, close enough. It's not as good at barbecues when people sort of ask, what do you do? I'd much rather say fighter pilot than quantity surveyor, because people normally say, like, what is that? But no, I enjoy it. I enjoy the challenge, and our job is to really maximize the deductions for the investor. And it's a big gamble for people, residential or commercial, when they're getting into setting themselves up for retirement or the financial future that they want. It can be very nerve-wracking. So our job is to just kind of look after that little part of it, to partner in them with their goals, and that's always rewarding for me. Yeah, no, fantastic. No, and then how long does it take for you guys to produce this report, like in terms of time-wise? With COVID, that makes it a little bit difficult, because there's, it depends on the state at the moment, but we can inspect vacant properties, which sometimes is possible with commercial. But most of our inspections are organised within about a week, and then it's normally 7 to 10 days for a report to be completed. If it's a huge commercial property, I mean, we've done properties with over 80, 100 million purchase price. Those can take a little bit longer, but most of the commercial properties that we do, we're turning the whole thing around within 2 or 3 weeks. Well, that's quite an amazing timeline. And just ballpark figure for something like this, for them to get a report on, what would it cost them? Yeah, so like with the little veterinary clinic, you'd probably be talking in the early thousands, maybe 1,200 to 1,500. With Dandenong, it might be sort of in the 1.8 to 2.2 or 2,200 sort of mark, depending on sort of the inclusions, because sometimes the purchase will include some furniture or computers and equipment. So that's a bit of a that's kind of a bit of a wiggle room in terms of the work that's required. But I think the most important thing is that if we don't see the report clearly paying for itself, then we won't recommend it. And with commercial, I mean, the return on investment for paying for a depreciation schedule is often absolutely massive, that people actually think it's too good to believe. They think I'm some sort of spruiker. I'm like, no, look, I don't care if you use us or somebody else. Just use somebody, because there's a lot of deductions there. Yeah, there's a lot more than people can imagine, and most people just now realise they have a resi and they just think it's the same thing across. And then now, one of the things that this video is going to highlight is that it's not going to be. And so really, guys, worthwhile for you guys to reach out to Mike. He's an absolute expert in what he does, and he's done many reports for our clients in our community, and they've been happy with it. And we've had him on multiple times. So details below. So his website details below. Or reach out to me at helentarrant.com and we can put you in touch with him. If you're looking for someone to help you build your commercial portfolio and to be part of that journey, reach out to me. We'll have a chat, and we'll, Mike is part of our process. So to our clients, make sure that we get not only get you the yield, but get you, the best ROI.
So thank you, Mike. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me. That was good fun.
Yeah, and we'll speak to you again very shortly.
Cheers.
Thanks. Bye.